This will be another lesson in the Becoming Human series. We'll take a quick look at the major milestones in human evolution. Our human journey can be briefly described like this. Our distant ancestors were apes living in the forest, but some of them evolved into small-brained bipedal apes. And then they evolved into larger-brained, group-living, tool-using human ancestors. And they evolved into fully cultural, language-using, modern humans. Along the way, our ancestors had to deal with new environment, a new diet, new social structures, new inventions, new brains, new discoveries, new competitors, like other humans. And this is why we see so much evolutionary change in our lineage compared to the chimps whose ancestors stayed in the forest. So that brings us to the key transition, that apes living in the forest encountered a climate change, and so the forests began to recede and woodlands and grasslands began to open up, and that forced some of the apes to have to make a living in that new grassland environment. So that was the key transition on the journey towards the human species. And Lucy is a nice transitional species. She evolved a bipedal skeleton to get around the landscape more efficiently. However, like her ape ancestors, she had a small brain. With the evolution of Homo habilis, we see now a larger brain, larger than Lucy, and that's why habilis is put into the genus Homo. So now we're going to call these ancestors human ancestors. In addition to a larger brain, Homo habilis was an early user of stone tools. Now, what did habilis use those tools for? To get meat from an animal carcass on the grassland. So in addition to eating plants in their environment, Homo habilis began a scavenging way of life. Now, scavenging is no easy task. There are other species that would have been competitors, hyenas and jackals and vultures and things. So they had to kind of work together to make this lifestyle work. But importantly, the meat that was added to their diet would make possible the future evolution of the larger and larger brain. And then we have the evolution of Homo erectus, and it's here where we see a more modern skeleton and a brain even larger than Homo habilis. Homo erectus started to make more sophisticated tools and is thought to be the first to control fire. Now, Homo erectus put its skeleton and its brains and its tools to good use in taking the next step, going from a scavenging lifestyle to an obligate collaborative hunting lifestyle. Obligate meaning they had to hunt, and collaborative meaning you have to really work together to make the hunting successful. By 500,000 years ago, there's evidence of sharp stones being attached to sticks. Here's a shoulder blade of a horse that has a hole in it, evidence of hunting. Again, that's 500,000 years old. And here's a spear that is over 400,000 years old. Homo erectus is also the first to begin cooking. And finally, then, we have the emergence of Homo sapiens, characterized by an even larger brain and the evolution of a vocal anatomy that allowed us to articulate more sounds in our spoken language. At this time, human groups expanded their range into many different kinds of geological areas with different climates. And of course, whenever you enter into a new habitat with totally different environmental conditions, it's going to force your group to come up with new ways of doing things, new solutions to the unique problems that the different environments pose. In addition, humans began to live in group sizes that were larger than our ancestors. And then we have the appearance of burial practices, and later art. Most recently, our species began to write. Now, scientists think that in the last 150,000 years, another sort of important phase of our human evolution occurred. And this is at the stage where humans were living in larger and larger groups, and it set the stage for competition between groups. Now, when you have competition between groups, it's as if there's a test going on here. Which groups are better at whatever the task is at hand? If it's war, then one group might be better than the other at waging war. Or if it's exploiting the resources in your environment, one group might be better at that than another. Or one group might be more coherent and more productive and more innovative than another. So in the last 150,000 years, scientists think that human evolution got to the point where now it was sort of a selection process between human groups with different characteristics. We might call this group selection. So just as natural selection, you have a population with individuals with different variations. And some of the variations might make you better fit to the environment than others, your competitors, and so you have a better chance of surviving and passing on that trait. Well, the same would apply at the group level. So some scientists argue this had an impact on the evolution of our psychologies, because individuals with psychologies that allowed them to work more effectively together, to have more cohesive groups, to have greater solidarity, to have more loyalty, to be more cooperative and productive and innovative, those groups would have an advantage in competition with other groups. So here is our story, a 6 million year story, sort of shown in cartoonish fashion here. But what's interesting and unique in our journey is that we can kind of see why it is that culture became so important for the success of our species. There's just so much to learn in dealing with the new environment. Now, we should also notice that we began as a relatively large-brained mammal, right? The primates had bigger brains. And so when you take a species like that and you force it to adapt to a new environment, well, brains are going to be part of the solution. And we see that in our species. We became the cultural species. Cultural solutions to the problem of life. That's how our species succeeded. And we can see that if we just take a peek into the home base here. So here's the human group, right, trying to deal with the new environment on the grassland with all the challenges they faced. Well, if you remember this group, you had to learn how to make the tools. You had to learn how to take care of the babies. You had to learn how to prepare food. You had to learn how to do the hunting. You had to learn how to stay safe from the predators. And norms, then, these are expectations that the group has for certain behaviors. You had to learn the ways of the group and what was expected of you. You had to be a good member of the society. So there was a lot of stuff to learn to be successful for yourself, but also to contribute to the success of your group. And so under these conditions, then, we can see how the cultural environment becomes a more and more important selection pressure for the evolution of the human brain. Our interdependent lifestyle, all the language we were using, the knowledge and skills we were accumulating, all of those features of our cultural environment put great demands on human brains. So that favored brains that could make use of that cultural information and indeed improve upon it. So the scope and complexity of these interactions just don't happen in chimp society. We've seen in other lessons that the chimp ancestors just didn't have the problems our ancestors faced. There just isn't a lot of culture needed to survive as a chimp in a forest. And so this completes our quick account of the milestones in human evolution.